It's finally here, the graphical version of Slave to Armok, God of Blood, Chapter 2, Dwarf Fortress, Histories of Gluttony and Labor. I've been playing Dwarf Fortress since I was like 12, 13, a long time, and there's a tutorial in the game now, but I figure a lot of people are going to want a bit more than a tutorial. They're going to want like an experienced player giving advice on how to play the game. So here it is. We're going to start creating a world, and this I think will help because the tutorial actually skips this part. We're going to be focusing on embarking and then another video on creating the fortress. So these are the world generation settings. They're mostly self-explanatory. Make a world bigger or smaller. Small is fine. I think I normally play on medium. Large, I think, is excessively big. But like pocket is tiny. I wouldn't ever play on pocket really. But like small, medium, I'll go with medium. History and length. This affects a lot of things. So this may take several minutes. This may take a long while. There used to be a setting just on the default screen to go up to 1,000. Probably removed that because it takes a really long time, and I wouldn't recommend going that long. I like 250 personally, but the main effect this has is it will increase the size of civilizations. So we have these number of civilizations. So the longer it runs, the more they'll have time to found cities, grow in population, fight wars. So if you want like a developed world where civilizations are large and there's not as much empty space, like a longer world generation will help get that. If you go 5 years, most civilizations will be 1 or 2 settlements, which is a lot smaller. And one potential downside to this is that the resources available when trading with your parent civilization and on embark depend on the resources found within land owned by that civilization. Most large dwarf civs will have every possible resource, at least somewhere, and even small ones will have a good amount available, as there's a large set of resources that are always available. However, what ores you can get depend on what ores they have, so if you want to trade for iron and coal, you'll be taking a risk playing on a world with very short world generation. So, like 100, 250 are both fine. Another important thing it affects down here is number of beasts. This is like, I think it's mostly mega beasts or semi-mega beasts which can come and attack your fortress. Now I think these are fun, right? These are good to have, you want to have them. If you go very high, they can actually wipe out civilizations, particularly early on. They're quite weak, so I normally just go high, but the longer you generate the world and the more civilizations you have, the more of these beasts will die out. The world spawns with a set number of them that never increases, it just slowly decreases. So you have to be careful about that. Number of civilizations, it's pretty similar. I think medium's fine. High can be nice too. One reason to set it to high is to make sure that you have contact with every other race. Humans, elves, and goblins, I would recommend that you have them accessible to your fortress to like experience the whole game. And if you go on like very low, there might not even be any elves or goblins anywhere in the world. And so I mean medium is probably going to be fine. If you want to be sure about it, you can go to high. I'll just stick with medium. Maximum number of sites is like how many cities they can found. It's not something I've ever personally paid attention to. I've never noticed like, oh, they should be expanding more. And I mean, I guess if you want to keep things low population, you can go very low, but I don't think it's that important of a setting. Explain number of beasts. Even if you're going for like your first game and you want it to be easy, don't worry about it. They only attack once you're successful. So I think you want to have beasts in the world. Natural savagery is another one I've not paid much attention to in the past. it increases the number of savage biomes in the world. Savage biomes are just like a little bit more dangerous wildlife. It's never going to be very dangerous. Like, you might get like attacked by an alligator, but a skilled dwarf warrior doesn't have to worry about an alligator. It just might like attack your woodcutter and you can get in danger from that. I just left it at medium all the time. I suppose very low is easier. I don't think it's something you need to worry about the first time you're playing that. Mineral occurrence, I find it interesting they set it to everywhere by default. Sparse used to be the default. I've never played on everywhere, because there used to be a bug where the site finder would break when you used everywhere. But I've played on frequent before, I've played on sparse a lot, and I used to, one of the main things I use detailed mode for, which I'm not going to get into that much. There's a lot here, and it would only matter, once you know what you're looking for. The only thing, I'd like increase the number of mega beasts, right? And then my favorite setting for mineral scarcity was 2000. The default is 2500, so it goes down a bit, you get a bit more. But not like frequent is actually 500, everywhere is 100, and it's a pretty big difference, but I'll go with frequent. I suppose everywhere is easier, but it's not that big of a deal to have more minerals, really. You can always trade for more if you really need it, and even on like sparse, there's not going to be that few, and I don't think it's the kind of difficulty a new player will be struggling with. It's more knowing what to do, not, oh, do I have this amount of iron or a lot of iron? It isn't going to matter that much. So I'm going to create the world with these settings. I think they're fine for a first one. You can just go with the default. It isn't a big deal. And so here it is. It's going to take a while to create the world. This is kind of new. At the top left, there's a few random historical events. So we can see on the map settlements popping up. These are some dwarven settlements in these mountains. They're slowly expanding. If we look down here, there's a few things. That's a castle, clearly. I'm not familiar with everything in the new graphics, so I'm assuming these are just human towns. These are probably dark fortresses. Those are probably goblins. These puddles that keep appearing. I can't see any elves. They might just not be around at this part of the map. Okay, so it finally generated. So we'll just play now. Okay, so the 3 game modes. Fortress, Adventurer, and Legends. Adventurer, I guess, isn't in yet. It's okay. The tutorials for Fortress mode. Legends, I think, is actually pretty interesting. They've changed how it works, making it a lot easier to navigate, so you can click between things. I'm just kind of randomly clicking. It's basically once you're like a nerd that wants to know everything about the world you play in before you start playing in it, you can do that. But, again, first game, just Fortress mode. Okay, now this tutorial, it actually skips the embark process, which I was a bit surprised by. It still did it for you, so there's no help for a player on finding one, except heed the warnings about aquifers. That, absolutely agree. Aquifers can be quite difficult. Here's the world. It doesn't all fit on my screen at once. You have to scroll down. You can see there's quite a lot. Now the main thing we're going to want to do is search for an embark location. There's a lot of options for what to search for. The dimension, that's how big you want your area to be. 4x4 is the default. 3x3 is also good, a little bit smaller, but it'll run faster. If you're concerned about that, I would not recommend bigger. Savagery searches for a savage biome or not, which would be a little bit more dangerous animals. like giant ones. Again, it's not a huge deal, but I mean, I guess you could search for wilderness or calm. I don't think savagery isn't the most dangerous thing about a biome. Spirit is the most dangerous thing. Evil biomes are dangerous. Avoid those. Each evil biome is different. There's a variety of effects, but just stay out of them for now. Good biomes, they're fine. They're not like the opposite of evil. They're not like that much more dangerous. Unicorns are kind of dangerous. If you're in a savage good biome, you can have dangerous unicorns. I'd just stick with the normal one. There's benefits to good, but most of the world is going to be normal, or you can just do neither and decide based on what recommendations you get. Elevation can help you find different types of locations if you like mountains, or if you want to be near a coast. It's not something I would normally filter for. Temperature, I think typically high is easier, though you might end up with more deserts, which are not good, but medium would be nice too. Low temperature is typically going to be harder, mainly because water will be frozen a lot of the time, which is a minor issue. It's not a big deal, just it's a little bit easier to be at a higher or medium temperature. I wouldn't filter for it. Rain, I also don't think it matters. It would affect what type of biome. If you're looking for like a jungle, you can go high temperature, high rain. But I typically focus on the mechanical stuff. That's going like aquifers, no. And then look at what options I have to be like, there's a jungle that fits my requirements, I'll go to that jungle. Drainage is similar. It affects what type of biome you're getting. Low drainage is like a swamp. High drainage is... I don't actually know. One of the big effects, though, is aquifers. I believe low drainage is so likely to have an aquifer. Aquifers are basically some portion of the ground will have water just flow out of it. And so when you're digging, as a dwarf, digging underground, water will just appear. Heavy aquifers are extremely dangerous. I don't know if I've ever even gotten through a heavy aquifer. I think I've just avoided them. Light ones are relatively new, so I haven't actually tried getting through one of them, but they're easier, but still definitely not what you want the first time. The river, I'd say river does two things mainly. It's a source of drinking water, and it can be used to irrigate farms. Drinking water isn't as big of a deal as it sounds, because dwarves are all alcoholics, and so they want to be drinking alcohol instead of water. And if you don't give them water, if you don't give them alcohol, they'll have penalties, they'll be mad. But it's a good backup. For a first game, absolutely make sure you have a river, so that you will have a backup source of hydration for the dwarves in case something goes wrong with your alcohol production. But once you know what you're doing, a river is mostly unnecessary for that purpose. Irrigating is mostly a thing you do if you want to farm underground, and even then, only if there isn't soil. If you mine out stone, you can't grow on it by default, but if you run water over it, you'll be able to. And rivers are an easier way to get water that you can flow over a bunch of ground to make it suitable for farming. I almost forgot a third use for water. Medical care. Wounded dwarves in a hospital are only given water to drink, not alcohol, and they'll need to be cleaned with water, a few other minor uses. So it helps to have that accessible early game, but you'll always be able to find water underground in the caverns, so it's not necessary for that purpose, but definitely helpful. Soil is very useful. I'd like to say you should be searching for some soil, but you actually can't. For some reason, the settings are less than or equal to deep, less than or equal to some, less than or equal to little, or none. I would prefer some or deep soil. that's not an option in the search. So you can't do anything unless you want a small amount of soil. You want only a small amount. This setting is useless for some reason. I think they must have changed it, because I'm sure I've used it in the past, but I don't know, it's a bit strange. Clay, it's a crafting resource for pottery, which is kind of niche. It's not like important. Just, if you're like, I want to do pottery today, that might be fun. Like it's like a completely optional, not very useful, but sure, if you want to make sure you have clay for pottery, you could. Sand is basically the same. Glass is very similar in effect to pottery. And then here we have the metals. So we cannot display all of them at once. The most important, the most useful metals are going to be iron, silver, and I suppose copper, and then tin. You don't want to just set them all to yes, because then you'll be too restrictive. Iron is used to make steel. It's not better than bronze. They're pretty similar, but bronze, you need copper and tin to make the alloy. Then you make it iron, you just use raw iron, it's almost as good. And then you can make it into steel, which is the best generally available metal. Silver is the best material for blunt weapons, which is why you might want that as well. Most of the other metals are just there to make into crafts for money. One notable aspect, the most valuable metals are platinum and aluminum. They're tied, because back before electricity, the only way to get aluminum was native aluminum, which is basically just aluminum in metallic form in the ground, which is actually extremely, extremely rare. Gold is quite valuable, silver is quite valuable. The rest vary in levels. Some of them you can make into fancy alloys. There's bismuth bronze as well, which is identical in function to regular bronze, but it uses some extra bismuth. So you could go, I want copper, tin, and bismuth. I want to do a bismuth bronze playthrough for some reason. But for my recommended first settings, iron, yes, that's most important. And then, just have fun. I like silver and copper because there's an ore tetrahedrite, which is silver and copper in the same ore. And that's one of my favorite ores. I get 2 metals, woohoo! Just gonna look around the map now. The map is actually my favorite part so far. It looks very nice. Okay, once the matches are found, you don't hit begin. You just right click, and then it removes the thing from there, so you can see what you're hovering over again. But you still see the green squares marking the sites that match what you searched for. So because we couldn't put everything into search requirements, there's going to be several things you're looking for in a site itself. One of the big things I think you should check for is the neighbors section. Ideally, I think it would be best to have elves, humans, and goblins accessible from the same fortress. If you're worried about the military aspect, you can try and avoid goblins. Humans and elves will mostly be friendly. Elves will get mad if you cut down too many trees. Humans are good to have around. But this world doesn't have any places I can find without goblins. Ooh, kobolds! Huh. Kobolds used to not be viewable on here. It's a bit disappointing that there's very few sites with kobolds. Kobolds are kind of fun. Just a small little enemy, but there's no good sites with kobolds available, unfortunately. So the main area I've seen elves, humans, and goblins is up here, and there's going to be a bunch of different spots recommended. This is a little bit different from how it used to work. It used to recommend a larger tile, and you choose a place within the tile. Here it's giving me 4x4 sections. It's a badlands, so there's no trees, no vegetation. You used to be able to search for trees. they've removed that apparently. That's a bit of an issue, because you want to have trees. That definitely makes things easier. Other vegetation is also helpful, so let's avoid the badlands. I actually forgot one of the most important ones. Flux stone layer. This is very valuable. Flux stones are a type of stone. There's, I believe, 6 of them that will... they can be used in the creation of steel. They're a necessary part of that process, so just having them available in your fortress is very nice. And they're also twice as valuable as every other rock. Every other rock is like a base value of 1, which means, you know, the lowest. Fluxstone is 2. It's twice as much, which, you know, 1 to 2 doesn't seem like much, but when you're making that rock into a masterwork table, it actually does matter. So I like to have flux stones just to have the most valuable tables available. Okay, so I've redone the search, and it's pretty similar looking anyway. So if we look down here, we're actually going to find... this might be our best spot. Because one thing... mountains... So you can't embark entirely within mountains. If I actually pull up the square, it's going to say you can't embark entirely on water or mountains. And embarking partially on mountains can be a bit bad because there's typically no soil at all on mountains, which means no plants, no trees, no grass, which you want for food, wood, and grazing for your animals. So, you know, it can be good to just embark like near a mountain like this. So we see temperature warm, that's nice. Trees, woodland, other vegetation, moderate. That's great. That's exactly what we want. It's only little soil, but it'll probably be okay. We've got all 3 civilizations available. I was considering if this didn't work out, I'd just remove like silver and copper from my search, because those aren't as important as iron. So there's something a little bit weird about how it does this. It seems is it searching in the grid? Yeah, I don't know exactly how it's doing it. It's choosing 4x4 tiles, which is different from how it used to do this. It used to get like 16x16 tiles, and you would choose, say, somewhere in here is a good spot, but you could move it around a little bit. So like, if I chose here, I'd only have the river in the corner of it. I don't really want that. If I chose here, I'd only have the river on one side. I kind of like having the river in the middle, at least a little bit. So I'm pretty sure I can move it to the side and be safe, but it's not telling me that it actually fits all my requirements. And one thing, I was mentioning the mountains earlier, to look out for, sometimes it will give you an embark area of like 4x4, where within that area there are places that fit all of your requirements, but they can be different ones. So we see this mountain. If theoretically I'd been searching for a place with at least some vegetation, the mountains wouldn't be fitting that. But this one is still included, would still be included because, oh, the Badlands have some vegetation, but it's only the corner of the embark area. You would not want that small amount of vegetation, especially if it's only Badlands with a small amount. There's a corner with a small amount of vegetation. You'd want to make sure you're embarking in a place that at least all of it has a small amount. But this seems like a fine site. Let's try this out. There's an aspect of embarking that I almost forgot, so I'm doing it on a different world. You can choose your origin civilization. This doesn't matter much. It can potentially affect what goods you have access to. Mostly if a civilization is small. These aren't even that big, but they're probably going to have everything a dwarf could have access to. But if you have only like one site, they might not have iron at that site, and then you won't get caravans with iron. That can be a problem. So you want like something with you generally want a bigger civilization. And I like, just for fun, to have it be near where I'm going to embark. It's mostly for like the nerds that read through legends to learn about the world, you know, which, you know, I do that as well. And so it isn't a huge deal. You can found a fortress even if your civilization barely exists because migrants come out of thin air for the most part. Some of them will be historical characters, so like the bigger the civilization is, the more historical characters you might find them, but it doesn't really matter if they're historical. It's mostly for like, you know, if you want to roleplay it. The Pick of Bristling will found a fortress here, right? And it'd be weird if I was playing the Attic of Trumpets and I was making a fortress here, because that's really far away and they're much closer. So if you care about that. And now, this is taking a little bit longer than expected, so I'm actually going to split the embark screen into a separate video that will be coming out hopefully tomorrow.